London, 1932. The Ashcroft estate loomed in a hush of winter fog, its gilded windows flickering with faint lamplight. Within, a scream shattered the night, high, brittle, and abruptly silenced. Servants rushed toward the west wing only to find Lady Evelyn's dressing room sealed from within. When the door was forced, horror awaited. The great Venetian mirror lay in shards across the marble floor, and amidst them, Lady Evelyn's lifeless body, her face pale as porcelain. The glass fragments glittered like frozen tears, reflecting not only her death, but secrets long concealed. Summoned from London, Hercule Poirot arrived, mustaches twitching with curiosity. Chapter 1. The Shattered Silence. The chill of a London evening clung to Hercule Poirot as the motorcar carried him northward, away from the smoke-stained bustle of the city, and toward the sprawling estate of Ashcroft Manor. A thick fog hung low upon the moors, blurring the stark outlines of barren trees and muting the lamps that dotted the winding road. It was, Poirot mused, a suitably theatrical setting for the tragedy to which he had been summoned. The telegram had arrived that morning, its words clipped and formal. Urgent. Lady Evelyn Ashcroft dead under suspicious circumstances. Request your immediate presence. Scotland Yard informed. Chief Inspector Japp. Poirot had not hesitated. A wealthy society matron found lifeless in her dressing room, the shattered remains of a Venetian mirror scattered around her. It was precisely the sort of puzzle his little gray cells relished. The motor car drew up before the manor gates, tall iron bars twisted into Gothic flourishes. A uniformed constable saluted and waved the vehicle through. Poirot adjusted his mustaches in the reflection of the window, as precise in his grooming as he was in his deductions. When at last the car rolled to a halt before the great house, Poirot stepped out into the mist. Ashcroft Manor rose from the earth like some brooding monument, its stone walls ivy-choked, its windows burning faintly with the glow of lamps. The silence of the place. It opened. The room within was one of opulence, gilt-edged furniture, velvet draperies, and along the far wall, or rather what remained of it, a Venetian mirror once grand and towering. Now it lay in ruin, shards glittering across the floor like a field of frozen stars. Amidst the wreckage, Lady Evelyn Ashcroft rested motionless, her pale form draped in a silken gown of ivory. Her face was composed, almost serene, save for the faint bluish tinge about her lips. Poirot stepped closer, careful to avoid disturbing the glass. He regarded her with solemnity, his sharp eyes scanning not only the body but the scene entire. "Mon pauvre Japp," he murmured, "what a cruel theater death makes of the vanity of life." Japp snorted. "She was found like this by the maid. Door locked from inside, windows bolted, no sign of forced entry. Dr. Graves says heart failure, at first glance. But with that mirror smashed to bits and the lady sprawled in the middle of it, I'm not satisfied." Poirot crouched delicately, lifting a shard of glass between finger and thumb. The edge caught the lamplight, throwing a fractured reflection of his own eye back at him. He frowned. "Curious. See here, Japp, the pattern of the fragments. They do not scatter naturally. They lie in arcs as though arranged." "Arranged? You mean someone smashed it deliberately?" "Mais oui. And perhaps staged the fall of glass to conceal or to reveal something else." He straightened, eyes narrowing upon the victim's hands. One clutched a silk scarf torn at the edge. The other rested, open, palm upward, as though offering some silent testimony. "Tell me," Poirot said softly. Who discovered her? The maid, Clara Whitmore. Loyal sort, but trembling like a leaf. She swears she found the door bolted and raised the alarm. Bon, I shall speak to her. A shadow moved in the doorway. A tall man with a soldier's bearing, his hair silvered though his frame remained strong. His face was set in lines of disdain. That will hardly be necessary, he declared. Assigned him. Interesting, n'est-ce pas? Moments later, the maid Clara was ushered in. She was a thin young woman with anxious eyes and a cap perched precariously atop her auburn hair. Her hands twisted at her apron as she curtsied. "Oh, sir, it was dreadful. I knocked to bring her evening chocolate, but she never answered. I tried again. And then I smelled. I don't know, something bitter in the air. I called for help, and when they broke the door, she was as you see her now." Poirot inclined his head gently. "You served Lady Evelyn faithfully, mademoiselle?" "For 6 years, sir. She was demanding but kind, in her way." Her eyes flickered. Though lately she had been restless, troubled. Troubled how? She spoke of changing her will, and she quarreled often with Sir Reginald. Clara hesitated, then lowered her gaze. She said the mirror, her Venetian mirror, showed her things she could not bear. Shadows, she called them. Poirot's brows lifted. Shadows in the glass? Yes, sir. She was frightened of it. And yet she would not part with it. She said it was her truth. Poirot made a note in his pocketbook, his mustaches twitching thoughtfully. As Clara was dismissed, Poirot's gaze drifted once more to the scattered fragments. Something caught his eye, a glimmer, faint but distinct, upon a shard near the lady's shoulder. He stooped, lifting it carefully with his handkerchief. There, smudged faintly upon the surface, was the trace of lipstick. A single, deliberate stroke, as though someone had written upon the mirror before it shattered. The smear was half lost in the breakage, but Poirot's eyes sharpened. Letters, perhaps? Or symbols? He smiled faintly, a glimmer of satisfaction in his expression. "Ah, ma chère Lady Evelyn, even in death you leave us a message. Now we must learn to read it." The room seemed to darken as he straightened, the weight of the mystery pressing in like the fog beyond the buttered his toast with geometrical precision, and stirred his chocolate until it swirled in perfect concentric circles. Inspector Japp, who had stayed the night at the manor to oversee matters, pushed into the room with a grimace. "Morning, Poirot. You look as though you've slept like a baby." I, on the other hand, had a devil of a night. The servants are whispering ghost stories. The husband's about as cooperative as a brick wall. And the cousin, well, she's raising Cain already about inheritance. Poirot dabbed delicately at his mustaches with a napkin. "But of course, mon cher Japp, death never arrives alone. It brings with it disorder, suspicion, and sometimes opportunity. Tell me, has the body been examined further?" "Dr. Graves insists it's heart failure," Japp muttered. "But I've ordered a toxicology test on the blood. Just a hunch." Meanwhile, the coroner's carted her off. Leaves us with little to go on besides that smashed mirror of hers. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, but that, my friend, is no small thing. A mirror is the most faithful of witnesses. It records everything, though it speaks in silence. The task is only to understand its language." Japp sighed. "Trust you to wax poetic over a looking-glass. Anyway, Lady Evelyn's cousin, Beatrice Morland, has been demanding to speak to us. says she can shed light on her dear cousin's state of mind. Personally, I think she's sniffing around the will. Poirot rose briskly. Then let us indulge her. Always, the relatives, how shall I put it? They are most enlightening. Beatrice Morland received them in the morning room, a chamber lined with French windows that opened upon the mist-veiled gardens. She was a tall woman in her late 30s, with sharp features and a voice pitched low but firm. She wore mourning black, though the crispness of her dress suggested she had prepared it hastily, perhaps with relief rather than grief. "My cousin's death is a tragedy," she said, pouring tea with steady hands. "But I confess I am not shocked. Evelyn was fragile, far more than she ever, but I also know she intended to alter her will. She hinted to me, oh, not directly, but with insinuations, that she wished to provide for others. For her maid, for that art dealer she consorted with. Such generosity was folly. The estate is Ashcroft blood, not to be scattered at whim." Jap leaned forward. "So you admit you'd stand to gain if her plans didn't go through?" Beatrice's expression hardened. "I inherit what is rightly mine. If that is gain, then so be it. But do not mistake me, Inspector. I had no hand in Evelyn's death. My cousin was vain, capricious, and increasingly unstable. I dare say her own fears destroyed her." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Merci, madame. You have given us much to ponder." As they left, Poirot whispered to Jap, "Do you observe, mon ami, how swiftly she speaks of gain and loss, and how little of sorrow? Such candor, it is often a mask." Later that morning, Poirot returned to Lady Evelyn's chamber. The room had been tidied slightly, the body removed, but the mirror shards remained in a careful heap, catalogued by constables. Poirot requested privacy and knelt once more among them. He laid out the fragments, one by one, like pieces of a great puzzle. Some were gilded with ornate edges, others plain sheets of glass. Yet as he arranged them, his eye caught on something peculiar. The breakage radiated not from the center, but from one side. "Voilà," he murmured. "This mirror was struck from without, not shattered by a fall within. Someone wished it broken." He studied the carpet. Though servants had trodden over it, one faint impression remained, a heel mark near the base of the mirror stand. A woman's shoe, narrow and delicate. Poirot smiled thinly. Someone stood here, someone not Lady Evelyn, whose slippers yet rest neatly by her dressing chair. On the vanity table he examined the lady's possessions. Bottles of perfume lined in perfect rows, brushes of ivory and silk. Vanity of a woman. It is the truest diary she keeps. That evening Poirot sought out Clara Whitmore once more. The maid sat alone in the servants' hall, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea grown cold. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "forgive the intrusion, but I must ask you again, had Lady Evelyn quarreled with any in the household recently?" Clara's eyes darted. "Sir Reginald was angry with her often. And Dr. Graves. He visited late at night, more than once. She said it was for her health, but I thought she feared him. She locked her door after those visits." Poirot studied her closely. "And you, ma petite? You were faithful to her, yes? Yet, perhaps, you resented her?" The maid flushed. "She meant to dismiss me. She said my hands were clumsy, that I had dropped one of her mirrors. I would have been ruined, sir. But I swear I never harmed her. Poirot inclined his head. I believe you, child. Yet fear leaves marks, remember that. As he turned to leave, Clara whispered, almost to herself. She said the mirror showed her death. She said she saw it coming. Poirot paused, mustaches twitching. The mirror again. Always the mirror. Curious. That night Poirot paced the library where he had been granted lodgings. The fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. He considered all he had heard. Evelyn's obsession with mirrors, her intent to alter her will, the cousin eager for inheritance, the maid threatened with dismissal, the absent powder compact. Most curious of all was the mirror itself, broken from without, not within. Staged, perhaps, to conceal a clue, or to silence it. And upon the shard, the trace of lipstick, forming the beginnings of a word. Poirot leaned close to the fragment, holding it up to the lamplight. Slowly, the letters emerged, not M, not W, but perhaps L. An initial, half Evelyn's death. The mist did not lift. It pressed against the windows, dulling the light and giving the manor the atmosphere of a mausoleum. Poirot thrived in such environments. Gloom to others was clarity to him, but even he acknowledged that the tension in the air was beginning to choke the servants. It was in that brittle silence that he began his close inspection of Clara Whitmore, the lady's maid. She was summoned to the library that morning. Her step was hesitant as she entered, her face pale, her hands clasped together tightly, as though she sought to keep them from trembling. Poirot observed her in silence for a long moment before gesturing to the chair opposite him. Mademoiselle Whitmore, sit, if you please, he said. You are frightened, yes? Yes, sir, she admitted. It is a dreadful thing. I cannot stop seeing it. Her, lying there among the glass. Do not be afraid of the memory, child. It is not the memory that harms. It is the truth concealed within it. Tell me, what did you see when first you entered the room? Her voice faltered. I never entered, sir. The door was bolted. I only knocked, and when there was no answer, I raised the alarm. When the men forced it, she was already gone. Poirot leaned forward, steepling his fingers. And yet, mademoiselle, a glove of yours was found amongst the shards. Explain this. Clara's head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. My glove? That cannot be. Mais oui. Pale kid leather, embroidered edge. Yours, n'est-ce pas? Tears sprang into her eyes. It must have fallen earlier in the evening. I tidied her chamber after dinner. Perhaps it slipped then. I swear, sir, I had nothing to do with her death. Poirot's gaze remained steady. It is possible. But one must ask, if you lost the glove, why did you not search for it? I did not notice it was missing, she whispered. Poirot let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. At last he nodded slightly. Très bien. Tell me of your mistress on that final day. Was she different? Yes, Clara said softly. She was restless. Guilt of murder, or guilt of another sort? That is yet to be determined. Poirot spent the afternoon reviewing statements. The timeline was tight. Lady Evelyn had retired early. The maid had last seen her alive around 9 o'clock. The door was bolted from within when she returned at 10. By the time they forced entry, Evelyn was dead. Poison required planning. It must have been administered earlier. That meant the killer had reached her before she locked herself in. At dusk, Poirot walked the west wing corridors, listening. The manor creaked and sighed with the settling of timber, but beneath those sounds, other noises stirred. Hurried steps muffled on carpet, whispers trailing away before he turned corners. He knew the sound of guilt when he heard it. Near the servants' stair he paused. A narrow window overlooked the stables, where lanterns flickered faintly in the fog. Voices drifted through the still air, hushed, urgent. Poirot pressed closer, straining to hear. It was Clara Whitmore. Her tone was sharp with fear. "You promised me it would not come to this. If they discover—" Another voice, lower, male, cut across hers. Poirot could not catch the words, only the rhythm, firm and commanding. Clara's reply was desperate. "No, I won't lie for you again. They'll know." Poirot withdrew silently. His eyes gleamed in the darkness. A liaison, perhaps? Or blackmail? In either case, Clara was entangled more deeply than she had admitted. Later that night, Poirot took to the library again, where the constable on duty dozed by the hearth. Poirot paced slowly, assembling the facts in his mind. The maid had motive, fear of dismissal, perhaps resentment, but little opportunity if the room was locked after 9. Unless she was not alone in her actions. Unless the whispering voice at the stables belonged to one of the other suspects. He considered Sir Reginald. Indifference at his wife's death could be bravado, or relief. He considered Beatrice Morland, the cousin, her eyes too bright when she spoke of inheritance. And Dr. Graves, the physician, evasive, ruined. He would see to it. "Who, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked gently. But she only shook her head and fled the room. Jap muttered, "Well, that seals it. She knows more than she lets on." Poirot, however, stroked his mustaches thoughtfully. "Yes, she knows more. But not all knowledge is guilt. Remember that, mon ami. Often the innocent conceals secrets that are shameful but not murderous. We must not confuse the two." He glanced once more at the shard in his pocket, at the whisper of lipstick traced upon it. A message half complete, a truth half told. The maid's secret was not yet revealed, but it was close, so close that Poirot could feel it trembling in the air, like a curtain about to be drawn aside. And he, Hercule Poirot, would be the one to draw it. Chapter 4. The Physician's Burden. Dr. Lionel Graves arrived at Ashcroft Manor with the air of a man who had long since learned to hide the weight of his profession. Tall, thin, his face pale and sharp as parchment, he carried with him a black leather case that seemed, like himself, worn from years of secrets. When Jap summoned him to the study for questioning, Poirot observed him with an expression of mild politeness, though his gray cells thrummed with interest. Graves took the seat offered, his long fingers resting uneasily on the lid of his case. "Inspector," he said in a voice both weary and defensive, "I have already signed the preliminary report. Lady Evelyn's heart was weak. She had suffered palpitations for years. Her death is tragic, but not unusual." Jap grunted. "Funny thing then, Doctor. Our lab in London says otherwise. Poison was found in her system." For the first time, the physician's composure cracked. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes before he quickly masked it. "Poison? That is impossible. I monitored her medicines closely. There was no such substance prescribed." Poirot leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur le Docteur, forgive my intrusion, but one cannot monitor too closely when one sought other means." Poirot studied him carefully. And so, someone forged your hand to grant her what you denied. Who, Dr. Graves, knew enough of her afflictions to believe such a prescription would go unnoticed? The doctor's lips pressed thin. I do not know. I am her physician, not her confidant. Others in this house knew her moods. Perhaps her husband, though he mocked her. Perhaps her cousin, though she despised her. Perhaps the art dealer, Hargrove. Jap leaned forward. What about you, Doctor? You've got access. You could have slipped something into her tonic. I would never, Graves began sharply, then stopped, lowering his eyes. She was my patient. I have cared for her many years. If I am guilty of anything, it is failing to soothe her mind when it darkened. But I did not kill her. Poirot's mustaches twitched. And yet, the poison. It was not morphine. It was something more rare, more deliberate. Do you recognize the signature of atropine, Doctor? The physician looked up sharply. Atropine? Belladonna? That is dangerous, fatal if misused. I keep a vial of it for ophthalmic use under lock and key. It is missing. The silence that followed was heavy. Jap's eyes narrowed. Convenient. You admit the stuff was yours. I admit only that it was kept in my bag, Graves said quietly. If it has been taken, then someone in this household stole it. Poirot tapped the prescription slip lightly. And someone forged your hand. Doctor, you are burdened indeed, with secrets, with suspicions, with negligence perhaps. But murder? We shall see. That afternoon, Poirot requested to see Lady Evelyn's personal writing desk. It was a lacquered piece, French in design, filled with scented paper and half-written notes. Among them, Poirot found a folded sheet, an alteration to her will, not yet signed, not yet witnessed, but drafted in a fine script. It transferred— For something, Doctor? Poirot asked. Graves looked up, startled. Yes. The vial, the atropine. I thought perhaps it was misplaced, but no. It is gone. Poirot stepped closer, scanning the contents. Bottles, syringes, papers, all jumbled. He picked up one folded sheet. It was a note, unsigned. Its message was simple. If you do not provide what she asks, I shall ensure your career ends in scandal. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Blackmail, Doctor? Graves sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. Yes, I have been threatened. Lady Evelyn was desperate. She asked me for medicines I could not in good conscience give. When I refused, she turned cruel. She said she knew things that could ruin me. I thought it only words, but then the letters began arriving. I do not know who sent them, perhaps she herself, perhaps another. I destroyed most of them. Poirot's voice was gentle. And so, you are not merely burdened, Doctor. You are ensnared. Graves whispered, I did not kill her. I may have failed her, but I did not kill her. Poirot touched his shoulder lightly, then turned away. We shall see, Doctor. Truth has a way of breaking free, like light through a glass pane. And just as surely, the cracks will show us where to look. That evening, Poirot gathered with Jap in the drawing room. The fire snapped and hissed, casting restless shadows. You see, Jap, Poirot murmured. The physician is caught in a web. His medicine, his hand, his conscience, All point to guilt. Yet I do not believe him the murderer. He is too weighed by his own shame. The true killer is lighter of conscience, more daring. Then what about the missing atropine? That's no trifle. But who had opportunity to take it? Not only the doctor. Others had access to his case. The maid, the cousin, perhaps even Sir Reginald. It is a small vial, easily palmed. Japp shook his head. Firelight flickered against the broken glass, and Poirot smiled grimly. So, Dr. Graves, you are burdened with more than guilt. You are burdened with a message left by the dead, and we must learn whether it condemns you or saves you. The shards glittered like eyes in the darkness, and Poirot felt the riddle tighten around him. The mirror had spoken again, but in riddles, and as always, it would be his task to see clearly where others saw only fragments. Chapter 5. The Art Dealer's Affair. Julian Hargrove entered the drawing room with the polish of a man accustomed to admiration. His tall frame, his slicked hair, his neatly tailored suit, all spoke of wealth and vanity. Yet beneath the veneer was an air of tension, the faint twitch at the corner of his mouth betraying unease. Poirot, seated in a high-backed chair near the fire, greeted him with the mild courtesy of a host rather than an interrogator. "Monsieur Hargrove, do sit. Inspector Japp and I have questions for you." Hargrove smirked faintly as he crossed the room, his silver-tipped cane clicking against the parquet. "Questions? About poor Evelyn's death? A tragedy, to be sure, though given her frailties one might almost have expected it." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And yet, you were more than her art dealer, were you not?" Hargrove's composure faltered for an instant. He recovered with a dismissive laugh. "Nonsense. She was a valued client. I advised her on acquisitions. We shared a fondness for continental painters, that is all." But friendship has many shades, like the hues of a canvas," Poirot murmured. "Some are faint, some more vivid." He leaned forward slightly. "You were seen, monsieur, leaving her chamber one night only a fortnight ago. That was not the conduct of a mere advisor in art." Japp produced a notebook and flipped it open. "Witness says she heard raised voices, then saw you slip out of Lady Evelyn's room around midnight. What were you arguing about?" Hargrove's smirk vanished. He gripped the cane more tightly. "Evelyn was lonely. She sought companionship. I indulged her. But she grew demanding, unreasonable. She wanted me to devote myself entirely to her, to abandon my trade, my travels. That I could not do. We quarreled, that is all." Poirot's voice was soft. "And yet, a quarrel in such an atmosphere is dangerous, n'est-ce pas? Lady Evelyn was wealthy. You, those moment of violence." Japp slammed his notebook shut. "You've got explaining to do, Hargrove. Poison in her body, your shard in your coat, your quarrels with her. Looks bad." The art dealer stood abruptly, cane tapping hard against the floor. "I did not kill Evelyn. Yes, we quarreled. Yes, she was difficult. But I cared for her in my way. If she was poisoned, then someone else, someone who stood to gain more than I, must have done it." Poirot watched him coolly. "And who would that be?" "Her husband, of course," Hargrove said bitterly. "Reginald loathed her. He mocked her fears, her obsession with that wretched mirror. and yet he needed her fortune. He is far more likely than I. Poirot tilted his head. Perhaps. And yet Sir Reginald did not keep your shard in his coat. Hargrove's jaw tightened. He sank back into the chair, his defiance tempered by dread. Evelyn feared the mirror. She said it showed her truths she did not wish to see. Sometimes she begged me to cover it. I thought it was madness, but when it broke— He hesitated, eyes flicking to Poirot. Yes, Poirot urged. She whispered that it was not an accident, that someone wanted her gone, and the mirror knew. That night, Poirot sat alone in the library, the shard laid upon the desk before him. He traced its edge with a fingertip, reflecting on Hargrove's words. The lipstick smear, faint yet deliberate, formed not only the letter L, but with adjoining fragments, a second shape, a curve like a G. Lionel Graves. Again, the mirror pointed toward the doctor, and yet the shard rested in Hargrove's pocket. A contradiction, or a cunning arrangement. Poirot closed his eyes, summoning order to the chaos. The poison, atropine, missing from the physician's case. The forgery, prescriptions and draft wills in Graves' hand. The shard, lipstick message pointing to LG, yet found with Hargrove. The motive, wealth, resentment, passion, blackmail. The mirror fractured truth that this shard, bearing her accusation, was found in the pocket of Monsieur Hargrove's coat. The room fell silent. Hargrove rose, his voice trembling. I do not know how it came there. Perhaps someone planted it. Poirot raised a hand. Perhaps indeed, which is why we must consider who among you had cause both to poison Lady Evelyn and to frame another, who had knowledge of medicine, of her mental torments, and of her quarrels of the heart, who stood to gain from her death, yet preferred to shift suspicion elsewhere. His words hung in the air, sharp as the glass he held. Poirot allowed the silence to linger, then lowered the shard back into its linen wrap. The truth, mes amis, is close. Very close. But before we arrive at it, I must examine one more matter. The finances of Lady Evelyn, and the curiosities of her will. He bowed slightly, dismissing them with a gesture. Until then, I ask only for patience, for the mirror has not yet revealed its full reflection. That evening, Poirot confided quietly to Jap as they walked the misted grounds. You see, mon ami, the mirror names the doctor, yet the shard rests with the lover. Each accuses the other. The murderer thinks himself clever to sow confusion, but he forgets. The glass remembers all. Jap scowled. And you think you've got it? Poirot smiled faintly. Not yet, but soon. The mirror may be broken, yes, but even broken glass reflects truth, if one knows how to arrange the pieces. The mist thickened around them, swallowing their steps. Somewhere within the manor, the murderer moved unseen, believing themselves safe. But Poirot knew better. The puzzle tightened, and the broken mirror gleamed like a blade in his mind. Chapter 6. The Cousin's Secret. Clara Whitmore sat in the morning room, her hands folded too neatly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the gray sky beyond the window. The storm of grief had passed over her face quickly, too quickly, Poirot thought, for now she looked composed, even resigned, as though she had prepared herself for— Learn to accept it. Acceptance, Poirot murmured, is a word that sits heavy upon the tongue when the heart is bitter. No, I think you envied her. The gowns, the jewels, the admiration of men. Perhaps even her lovers. Her cheeks flamed, and for a moment the mask slipped. Evelyn was careless. She paraded her affairs, made fools of us all. She thought herself untouchable. She was not. Japp leaned forward. You had motive then? Envy, maybe inheritance too. We've reason to believe she was changing her will. Clara stiffened. Her will? Poirot withdrew from his pocket the fragment he had discovered. Lady Evelyn's drafted bequest to Clara, written in Graves' hand. He laid it gently on the table before her. Her eyes widened. She reached for it instinctively, then stopped, as if touching it would betray too much. Where did you find this? In Lady Evelyn's desk, Poirot said softly. You see, she intended kindness toward you at last. And yet, she never signed it. Why, I wonder? Clara's composure cracked, her voice trembling. Because she was capricious. Always promising, never delivering. Do you know what it is like to live in the shadow of a woman who delights in reminding you of your insignificance? I devoted myself to her. I managed her household, soothed her moods, stood by her through every scandal. And she mocked me. She flaunted her wealth while I wore last season's gowns. Et voilà, Poirot murmured. The bitterness reveals itself. Clara's eyes glittered with tears, but they were sharp, not sorrowful. If she truly meant to change her will, she would have done so long ago. No, Monsieur Poirot. She enjoyed dangling promises. She enjoyed watching me hope. Japp's pencil scratched across the page. So you had plenty of reason to do away with her. I did not poison her, Clara snapped. I may have hated her at times, but murder? No, that was not my hand. He replaced the letter gently and turned to Clara, who hovered near the door, pale and trembling. You loved him, Poirot said simply. Her chin lifted, though her eyes brimmed. Yes, and why not? He is charming, brilliant. But Evelyn had him, as she had everything. He never looked at me. Poirot's voice softened. Unrequited love, envy, bitterness. Such emotions can twist the heart. They can make one desperate. Do you think I killed her for love of him? Clara whispered. If so, you are wrong. I am not so foolish as that. Poirot studied her in silence for a long moment. Then he inclined his head. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps your folly lies not in action, but in silence. For you know something, mademoiselle. Something you hide, perhaps to protect another. She turned away, her shoulders stiff. I have nothing more to say. That night, Poirot walked the corridors of Ashcroft Manor, his mind arranging fragments as he might arrange pieces of the mirror. Clara's jealousy, her letters to Hargrove, her dependence on Evelyn, all pointed to motive. But did they point to guilt? He paused outside the dressing room where the mirror had shattered. The shards still lay upon the velvet cloth, their reflections jagged and cruel. Kneeling, he fitted 2 more pieces together. The lipstick letters grew clearer. L.G. Again the doctor, again the burden placed upon his shoulders. But why had Evelyn chosen those letters? Had she meant Lionel Graves, or something else? Poirot's eyes flicked toward Clara's name in his little notebook. Clara Whitmore, initials C.W. No resemblance. Yet, in the letters to Hargrove, she had signed her name differently. Lena. Her childhood nickname, abbreviated from Clara. Lena Whitmore. Initials LW, not LG. And yet, if she had once used her mother's maiden name, Grayson, then her initials would indeed be LG. Yes, but I could never. I did not. Poirot touched her arm lightly. Mademoiselle, calm yourself. I do not yet accuse. But understand this. The mirror names you as surely as it names the doctor. And until the final shard is placed, suspicion will rest upon you both. Clara bowed her head, her sobs muffled against her sleeve. Poirot stood beside her in silence, his eyes thoughtful. The secret was out. Clara had loved where she should not, envied what she could not have, and hidden a truth that could condemn her. Whether she had poisoned her cousin, Poirot did not yet know. But the mirror had drawn her into its fractured reflection. And as Poirot left the conservatory, he whispered to himself, "The mirror shows many faces, some guilty, some innocent. But always it shows the soul. And this soul, I think, has more secrets still." Chapter 7. The Husband's Betrayal. The dining hall of Ashcroft Manor still smelled faintly of the previous evening's roast, though the morning light streaming through its tall windows softened the air. At the far end of the long oak table sat Sir Reginald Ashcroft, his hands wrapped loosely around a tumbler of brandy, though the hour was scarcely past 10. His eyes, bloodshot and heavy, fixed on Poirot and Japp as they entered. "So," he muttered, his voice thick, "now you come for me. I suppose you've spoken to Clara, to Graves, to that damned art dealer. They've all pointed their fingers. Why not add mine to the collection?" Poirot bowed with grave courtesy. "We come, Sir Reginald, not to condemn, but to understand. Truth, you see, is rarely a simple line. It curves, it doubles back, it hides in shadows." Japp sat heavily opposite, flipping open his notebook. "Let's skip the poetry. You and Lady Evelyn weren't exactly on a honeymoon footing, were you?" Reginald barked a humorless laugh. "Honeymoon footing? She despised me, and I returned the sentiment. She mocked me for my debts, for my failures at cards, for my investments gone sour. Yet she would have accident. Poison. Subtle. Feminine. That was not my style." Poirot raised a finger, his voice calm. "Ah, but subtlety, Sir Reginald, may be borrowed when brute force would draw suspicion. And let us not forget, the atropine came from the physician's case. Yet who had the freedom to wander the house, to open doors without question? The master, always." Reginald's face darkened. "Are you accusing me of rifling through Graves's bag?" "I accuse no one," Poirot said smoothly. "I merely observe. Opportunity you had. Motive you had. But there is more. There is also the matter of affection, or rather, its absence." He leaned forward slightly, his mustaches bristling. "Tell me, Sir Reginald, did you know of Lady Evelyn's diversions? Her companionship with Julian Hargrove?" Reginald's lip curled. "Of course I knew. She flaunted him, parading him in my own house. I told her once that if she wanted a lover, she should at least have the decency to be discreet. But Evelyn never cared for decency. She delighted in humiliation." "And yet," Poirot murmured, "you did not confront Hargrove. You did not strike him down. Why? Reginald's eyes flickered. Because he wasn't worth the effort. Evelyn used him as she used everyone. He would tire of her soon enough, but she would never tire of cruelty. There was silence for a moment. Poirot's eyes were sharp, thoughtful. Then he spoke softly. And so, you waited. You endured her games, until at last an opportunity arose, an unlocked case, a vial of atropine. A quarrel none witnessed. A quiet death in the night. Reginald stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the stone floor, his fists clenched at his sides. I did not kill her, Poirot. I wanted her gone, yes, I dreamed of it, but I lacked the courage to do it. That is my shit, Poirot. That's the smoking gun. Empty vial in his desk. What more do we need? Poirot's mustaches twitched. Perhaps, mon ami, we need to ask why hide the vial here, where it would surely be found. A murderer seeks to conceal, not display. You're saying it's a plant? Perhaps. Or perhaps it is proof of carelessness. Either way, it is not yet proof of guilt. That evening, Poirot convened once more with the suspects in the drawing room. The fire burned low, the air heavy with tension. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, we move closer to the heart of the matter. Each of you stands beneath suspicion. Each of you had reason to see Lady Evelyn dead. But now we see, too, how she sought to speak in her last moments, through the mirror. He lifted 2 shards, fitting them together before their eyes. The lipstick marks gleamed faintly, forming LG. Many believe this points to Dr. Graves, but perhaps it is not so simple. Perhaps Lady Evelyn in her haste left behind only fragments, not an accusation, but a riddle. Perhaps she wrote initials that could accuse 2 at once. Lionel Graves, yes, but also Lina Grayson. Clara Whitmore, as she once was. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Graves's face blanched. Poirot continued, and yet, what of the husband? So Reginald had motive as strong as any. The fortune, the humiliation, the debts. He possessed both freedom of movement and the knowledge of his wife's weaknesses. And in his study we find an empty vial. Too convenient, perhaps, but suspicious nonetheless. Reginald slammed his fist upon the mantel. This is madness. You toss suspicion about like dice on a gaming table. Who among us is safe? Poirot's eyes gleamed. No one, monsieur. Not yet. For the mirror is not whole. We lack still the final shard, the piece that will show us the truth entire. When I have it, then and only then shall the murderer stand revealed. That night Poirot lingered alone once more in the dressing room. Be the truth. Chapter 8. The Final Shard. The storm that had brewed all afternoon broke at last upon Ashcroft Manor. Rain lashed the windows in fierce torrents, and the moan of the wind filled the long corridors with a hollow, mournful song. In the library, where Poirot sat alone before the dying embers of a fire, the sound seemed magnified, a tempest both outside and within. On the table before him lay the reconstructed mirror, its fractured surface catching the firelight in glimmers and shards. Every time Poirot gazed into it, he saw his own reflection sliced into pieces, multiplied, distorted. An apt symbol, he thought, of the investigation itself. Yet one piece remained missing. The mirror was almost whole but not complete, and in that absent triangle lay perhaps the key to Evelyn Ashcroft's final words. Poirot stroked his mustaches. One piece, mon cher. One little piece and all becomes clear. Lady Evelyn, you left us a puzzle worthy of admiration. Now I must only finish it. The following morning, Poirot requested that the household assemble in the great hall. They gathered reluctantly, Sir Reginald, still pale and unshaven, nursing a flask in his hand, Dr. Graves fidgeting with his watch chain, Clara Whitmore, her face a mask of nervous composure, and Julian Hargrove, impeccably dressed yet with dark circles beneath his eyes. Poirot stood before them, holding the incomplete mirror. Mesdames et messieurs, we are close, so very close to the truth. But one fragment eludes us. One shard of glass that must be found if we are to know the murderer's name. I ask you, therefore, to consider carefully. Did any of you in the confusion after Lady Evelyn's death pick up a piece of this mirror? Did you conceal it, knowingly or unknowingly? They shifted uneasily. Sir Reginald let out a derisive laugh. You think we're playing scavenger hunt for scraps of glass? Nonsense! Poirot's eyes narrowed. Nonsense, perhaps. But murder is often hidden beneath. The lipstick traced across the surface no longer read LG alone. With the final piece in place, the scrawl extended further. LGR. Poirot's heart quickened. L.G.R. Lionel Graves, Clara Whitmore née Grayson, Reginald Ashcroft. 3 names at once, bound together by the same fatal signature. Poirot leaned back in his chair, the firelight flickering across his thoughtful eyes. Très bien. Lady Evelyn, you were clever. You knew your time was short, that your hand was unsteady. You sought not to accuse one alone, but to point toward a circle, a triad of suspects. For you knew not who had delivered the poison, only who wished you dead. He sat in silence for a long moment. The storm outside had calmed to a steady drizzle. The house was quiet. Yet beneath that quiet, he sensed the weight of secrets pressing close upon the walls. The next morning, Poirot summoned Japp to his chamber. The inspector entered with a weary sigh, his notebook under his arm. Poirot, I hope to God you found something, because I've half a mind to arrest the whole damned lot and sort it later. They're all rotten with motive. Poirot smiled thinly. Patience, mon ami. The mirror has spoken. It tells us not who, but how we must look. Evelyn left behind not certainty but suspicion multiplied. And yet, from suspicion truth will emerge. He explained the new revelation, the initials now pointing to multiple suspects. Japp swore under his breath. So it's as bad as I thought. They're all in it. Not all, my friend, but perhaps 2. Perhaps even 3. For murder, you see, is sometimes a solitary act and sometimes a conspiracy. Japp frowned. You're suggesting they might have worked together? Poirot raised a finger. I suggest nothing. I observe. Evelyn's death required access to atropine, knowledge of her routine, and opportunity in the night. Could one alone have done it? Yes. Reginald. But I see all. If I should die, the world shall know who is guilty. You cannot silence me forever. Poirot's lips pressed into a line. So, madame, You prepared for betrayal. You expected it. He slipped the note into his pocket and turned away, his mind whirling. At dawn, Poirot convened the household once more in the drawing room. The fire roared in the grate, rain tapped gently at the windows. "My friends," Poirot began, "the time has come. Lady Evelyn left us her final testament, broken though it was. The mirror speaks now in full. 3 initials, 3 suspects, bound together by her dying hand. The question remains, who among you placed the poison in her glass?" The silence was thick, almost unbearable. Then Poirot raised the note he had found. Evelyn suspected betrayal. She feared it would come from those closest to her. And indeed it did. For the poison was not placed by a stranger, nor by chance. It was placed by one who knew her habits, her vanity, her nightly glass of cordial. He paused, letting the weight of his words hang heavy in the room. "Soon, mes amis, you shall hear the truth entire. Tonight, all shall be revealed." The suspects shifted uneasily. Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. Graves' hands trembled upon his lap. Clara clutched her scarf as though to choke back her breath, and Julian Hargrove, though silent, stared at the fire with eyes dark as ash. Poirot's mustaches twitched. He bowed his head slightly. "Be ready, for the broken mirror will show us more than fragments. It will show us the murderer's face." And with that he turned away, leaving them in stunned silence, the firelight flickering across their uneasy expressions. Chapter 9. The Trap at Ashcroft Manor. The storm had cleared by evening, leaving behind a washed, gleaming world. Ashcroft Manor stood against the fading light, its great windows glowing like eyes. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, for Poirot had swaggering with forced bravado, a tumbler of whiskey in hand. Dr. Graves, pale, his spectacles fogged with nervous breath. Clara Whitmore, stiff-backed, clutching her gloves so tightly that her knuckles blanched. Julian Hargrove, handsome still but gaunt, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. When they had seated themselves, Poirot drew back the cloth with a flourish, revealing the mirror. Its fractured surface reflected each face in jagged, overlapping pieces, a grotesque mosaic. "Voila," Poirot said softly. "The final witness. Broken, yes, but not silent." He began slowly, methodically, his voice calm and measured. Lady Evelyn Ashcroft was poisoned with atropine, administered in her nightly cordial. The atropine was taken from Dr. Graves' case. This we know. But who placed it in her glass? Who seized the opportunity, with motive strong enough to risk all? He pointed a finger, delicate as a conductor's baton. "Sir Reginald, debts crushing you, reputation ruined, mocked by your wife at every turn. You had much to gain. The inheritance would free you, make you master of your fate once more." Reginald sneered. "And you found an empty vial in my study. Too neat, Poirot. Someone planted it." "Perhaps," Poirot agreed mildly. "But perhaps also you were careless. A man driven by desperation is not always meticulous." Poirot turned. "Dr. Graves, your profession gave you both access and knowledge. You were Evelyn's physician, trusted implicitly. She mocked you too, did she not?" Her barbs cut deeply. And you, a man of science, could easily disguise murder as natural malady. Graves' lips trembled. I swear to you, Poirot, I treated her, yes, but to kill her? Never. Poirot inclined his head, then faced Clara. Madame Whitmore. Once Clara Grayson. Companion, confidant, rival. Evelyn. The room grew taut, the silence vibrating like a drawn bowstring. Poirot drew himself upright, his eyes gleaming. But now, we must ask, who had not only motive but the chance, the precise chance, to tamper with the cordial? Let us consider. Each evening the cordial was placed upon the small table beside the bed. Lady Evelyn dismissed her maid, then drank before sleep. Who entered last that night? Clara's lips parted, but she said nothing. Graves tugged at his watch chain. Reginald shifted uneasily. Poirot went on. We know the vial was missing from Dr. Graves's bag earlier in the day. That bag was unattended for a short time, yes? A careless moment. But who knew? Who watched? Who seized upon it? He paused, letting the fire crackle in the silence. Lady Evelyn herself left us the final clue. The note I discovered in Sir Reginald's study, written in her own hand, addressed to him. If I should die, the world shall know who is guilty. Does a woman write thus to her husband unless she suspects him above all others? Reginald surged to his feet, face red, voice trembling with rage. She tormented me, Poirot. She taunted me daily. Yes, I dreamed of her death. Yes, I would have rejoiced to be rid of her. But I did not poison her. By God, I did not. Poirot did not flinch. He leaned forward, mustaches bristling. Then answer me this, Sir Reginald. Why was the cordial glass wiped clean of all fingerprints, save your own? The room exploded into gasps. Clara clutched her throat. Graves let out a choked cry. Hargrove muttered something inaudible. Reginald staggered back as though struck. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Poirot's voice was like steel. Yes, mon ami, you handled the glass last. You tried to erase the traces, but you left your own. And that, alas, is the fatal error. Japp sprang forward, clapping a hand on Reginald, remained firm. Peace bought with murder is no peace at all. It is a prison, tighter than any chains Evelyn ever bound you with. The fire roared higher, casting long shadows upon the walls. Japp signaled to the constable waiting outside, and Sir Reginald was led away, his head bowed, his steps heavy. For a long moment, silence filled the drawing room. Poirot replaced the cloth over the mirror, his expression grave. It is done, he murmured. The broken glass is whole, and though its reflection is dark, it is true. Clara wept softly into her handkerchief. Graves sank into his chair, gray and trembling. Hargrove rose abruptly and stalked from the room without a word. Poirot remained by the fire, his eyes fixed upon the covered mirror. Lady Evelyn was cruel, yes, but cruelty does not justify murder. Her final act was to give us this riddle, that truth might yet shine through the cracks. She was clever, even in death. Japp sighed, closing his notebook. Well, Poirot, you've done it again. Though God help me, I'll never understand how you see what the rest of us miss. Poirot smiled faintly.
Because, mon ami, I look not only at what is there, but at what is missing. One shard of glass, one fingerprint. These are the little things that betray the grandest lies. He turned back to the fire, the reflection of the flames dancing in his dark eyes. And now at last, Lady Evelyn may rest. The puzzle is complete. Chapter 10. The Broken Mirror Reassembled. Morning broke pale and thin over Ashcroft Manor. Mist hung low across the moors, turning the landscape into a shifting dream of gray and silver. Within the manor, the silence was uncanny. No footsteps echoed through the corridors, no servants moved briskly about their duties. It was as though the great house itself held its breath, grieving, or perhaps relieved at the unmasking of the murderer within its walls. Poirot stood at the window of the east wing, gazing across the damp lawns to where the fire was unlit. The air was damp and cool. On the table lay the mirror once more, its shards reassembled, its fractured reflection intact. Poirot gestured for them to sit. Clara's face was pale, her eyes red from weeping. Graves looked as though he had aged 10 years overnight. "My friends," Poirot began softly, "the law will punish Sir Reginald, and rightly so. But before we part, there is a truth that must be spoken. Lady Evelyn, in her final act, did not accuse blindly. She named 3. LGR. You both must ask yourselves why." Clara lowered her eyes. "She hated me, Poirot. Once I loved her, I was her closest friend. But that love soured. She knew my secrets, my indiscretions. She used them to control me. I will not deny it, I sometimes wished her gone, but to wish is not to act." Poirot inclined his head. "Très bien. And you, doctor?" Graves's hands trembled upon his knees. "I was careless. I should never have left the case unattended. I should have guarded it. And yes, I resented her mockery. She called me dull, tedious, a man of books with no spark of life. Perhaps I hated her in some quiet corner of my heart. But I did not kill her." Poirot studied them both, his dark eyes unreadable. "No, you did not. Yet you both played a role. Clara, in your silence and in your fear. Graves, in your carelessness. Lady Evelyn was not wrong to sense betrayal all around her. But in the end, it was her husband who poured the poison. That is the truth that matters." Clara wept softly into her handkerchief. Graves bowed his head, as though in penance. Poirot stood, laying his hand gently upon the mirror. "See how it reflects us. Not whole, but broken. Each fragment shows a different face, a different truth. Together they make the picture. Such is life, mes amis. Such is murder." That evening Poirot walked the grounds alone. The mist had lifted, leaving the moors vast and wind. Hand upon his arm. "Oui, monsieur. I believe you. For your weapon was not poison. It was your heart. And though it was wounded, it was not murderous." Julian closed his eyes briefly, then walked away into the shadows of the garden. When night fell, Poirot returned to his chamber. On the table lay the mirror, still reassembled. He lit a single lamp, its glow soft and golden. Then, with infinite care, he sat and gazed into the fractured surface. His own face stared back at him in fragments, his mustaches in one shard, his eyes in another, his mouth in yet another. He thought of Lady Evelyn, kneeling on the floor, her life ebbing away,
her last strength spent upon this mirror. He thought of her vanity, her cruelty, her brilliance. A woman both feared and admired, hated and loved. "Ma pauvre dame," he whispered. "You sought to speak, and you did. Not clearly, no, but enough. You gave us a riddle, and we solved it. Your voice was not wasted." He reached out and touched the glass. It was cold beneath his fingers. At last he drew the shards apart once more, carefully placing them into a velvet pouch. "You shall not hang upon a wall again," he murmured. "Broken things, they are best remembered, not displayed." The next morning, Poirot and Japp departed Ashcroft Manor. The carriage rattled down the long drive, past the iron gates, out onto the open road. Japp leaned back with a sigh. "Another one wrapped up, eh? Though I'll tell you, Poirot, it doesn't sit easy. Ashcroft was a brute, no doubt about it, but a man driven to desperation, to ruin. Still, justice is justice." Poirot smiled faintly. "Justice, yes. And yet I wonder, did Lady Evelyn not share some blame? She goaded, she mocked, she bound her husband in chains of pride and cruelty. But murder, Inspector, is always a choice. He chose death over endurance, and that choice is unforgivable." Japp nodded slowly. "You're right. Still, you've got a way of making me pity the villain as much as the victim."